You're watching Simple Talks on ChaKra Tv, and today we're in conversation with Ven Kalubowila Ananda Thero. Thero, let me move on to my next question. Now, there's a common belief among the people, not even in Sri Lanka, the whole world. The Buddhism is about sadness, impermanence, not accepting the excitement in life, let's just say that. Can you explain how one can be really happy adapting to a Buddhist way of life?
Right. I think first to answer about the common question, okay, is Buddhism always talking about suffering and sadness?
Yeah.
And this is going to be a little long explanation.
Yeah.
And the second thing is the even more dangerous allegation is that Buddhism is a nihilistic sort of a religion, which means that there's no sense of life. Anatta, the word anatta also has a sense of asara, which means that there's no essence of life, so sort of a thing. So a big allegation is that Buddhism is a pessimistic and a nihilistic religion. Now I think it's a very misinterpreted thing, because the whole word suffering is not what we really use suffering in colloquial terms. And in order to come that, the first part actually, Buddhism, it starts with dukkha satya, dukkha arisatya, etc. So it's the word suffering starts in the beginning. But actually, to see, in Buddhism, suffering is something totally different. Now I'll explain. Any person knows their physical sufferings. When you walk and then when you knock your head against something, or when you step on something tricky, there's physical suffering. And there's mental suffering. When you have to associate with people who are not very nice, that you don't like, or if your loved people are departed, you suffer. And if things are not working, when you are anxious, you suffer. That is mental suffering. But Buddhism focuses on a different suffering, which is we could call philosophical suffering or Arya Dukkha. Now that is not at all about those two suffering. It is something on a different realm or different understanding, which
different dimension,
which you won't ever feel. Now I'll give you a classic explanation. This chair was manufactured 2 years ago, and since its manufacturing, it has been decaying. And 10 years from now, 50 years from now, this will be a pile of rubble. This will be totally decayed. Because of that, I could say, since the birth of this chair, up until now, up until 2 years, it has been continuously decaying. So every millisecond, it decays. Even as of now, every second it decays. Now that's extremely logical and makes sense. But we can't notice that. If you look at it for 5 seconds, you cannot notice the decay. But you can sort of abstractly think of it. And that is the sort of suffering which is mentioned in Buddhism. It is not something that you can feel. So a lot of people misinterpret saying that it's a pain and suffering that you feel. In Buddhism, the philosophical suffering or Arya Dukkha is not something that you are going to feel. It's something that you contemplate abstractly. And while you have that abstract model, that is the way to find a release from those two mental and physical sufferings. Right? And in order to get that, you have defined, or Buddha has defined another suffering, which is not at all the suffering in the normal sense. So I think the common issue is that we use the word suffering here. If it was used as something else, like prajna or something, it would have been an issue. There's another reason. Back in the day, if you look at 2000 years ago, the living conditions are not so good. Now, for example, we have a dog in our temple. Back in the day, dogs were not treated very nice, but now we have rules against protecting dogs. Animal rights. And this dog received a fantastic treatment from a doctor. Back in the day, it wasn't a available option. And even if you have a cut or a fracture, back in the day, there was no the remedies available were not so comfortable like right now. Childbirth. Back in the day, it has to be natural childbirth. But now, childbirth is a C-section with an epidural, so you don't feel it at all. It's very easy peasy. So, suffering has changed a lot contextually. Back in the day, people actually had some hardships. My grandfather, he went to me. He was a farmer. He was in the Polonnaru district, and listening to his stories that there was malaria, there was elephants, all sorts of hardships. But I and my son even, we have to never face that type of arduous things. So suffering has changed contextually, and also it changes contextually on the person. Now, if you take a rich guy, rich man, or a wealthy politician, they don't have a suffering. They probably have a mental stress, but suffering in the normal sense is different. But when I got ordained, I was in Surya. In those areas, the suffering you really find that people don't have food, they only have vatakodu and rice to eat, you know. So they have a different set of suffering. So suffering is extremely contextual, and it's very misinterpreted on the other hand, because Buddhism, the suffering is not something that you feel, it's a philosophical suffering, which is
so I think now we all study Buddhism in schools, you know. So have we been taught something misinterpreted? No, I mean, I'm just wondering, like, I'm speaking on behalf of all the common people, so I'm just wondering whether we have been taught something different, something misinterpreted. Everybody says, you know, it's suffering. So, like I mentioned in the question, like, a lot of people take that, take the religion Buddhism as a, what do you call it, not a religion, a doctrine that teaches you the sadness in life. You know what I mean? So, that's what we've been taught. So that's what I ask you now. Have you been taught something totally misinterpreted?
Well, good thing I never paid much attention to myself. I'm kind of a distinction for regular Buddhism, but you know.
I mean, everybody in Sri Lanka has a distinction for Buddhism, but the things that are happening in the island.
Yeah, but funny enough, I was good at my studies.
Yeah.
I understood mathematics, I understood science, I understood history, but Buddhism I didn't understand. But I anyway just repeated whatever which was on the textbook, and I got a distinction. But you know, it left a question. I never understood Buddhism. So you know, looking back now, I think you can't understand something which is not true.
Yeah, that's true. Now see, there's division among in the religion Buddhism as well, Mahayana and Theravada. What is this difference, and how did this come about? Because I've been wanting to ask this question from somebody for a long time.
Right. Very interesting. Buddha's time, there was this particular sutra. Sutra is a syntax, or sutra is it's like a discourse pertaining to a particular context. Right? So there's a sutra called the Majjhya Sutra. It's done with 6 Arahat Theros, or enlightened people. And they have a discussion and they have an argument, and Buddha comes and settles the argument. I mean, not going to one day discussing, but they had 6 opposing views. And if you look at that, and if they had followers, they had their own students, those 6 sets of students would start going on these 6 paths. But what Buddha says is, you are all right. I mean, everyone's understanding about enlightenment is correct, but you have different views. And the explanation is that look at this tree. If you look from the front, you have one view, and if you look from the back, there's a different view. So depending on which angle you look, the truth can be seen differently, communicated differently. But what you know as essence is still the same.
And defined differently as well.
Defined differently as well. Because sometimes I find it very easy to explain Buddhism using financial accounting or marketing and economics. It makes it very easy. But someone would be totally against that idea. How can you explain Buddhism with economics? That's wrong. Buddhism has to be from Buddhist doctrine. And now this division initially would cause, and I say that I don't have an issue explaining Buddhism through economics. Someone would say, well, it's extremely wrong. Now there will be a division, and those two people will go on their separate paths. And more importantly, everyone who starts a new chapter doesn't have to be enlightened. And it could be a political reason, it could be a
social reason.
It could be anything. And sometimes we find that there are different, if you do a personality test, if you do these Briggs Myers or any personality test, you find there are different personality characters. And often you misinterpret the personality with the understanding or enlightenment. Those are two different things. There are certain innate qualities of a person which wouldn't be reduced even if you are enlightened. There are so many classic examples that there was this enlightened Thero called Ven. He, back in his births, he used to be a aristocrat, and he addressed people in a sort of a demeaning manner. And even after his enlightenment, he didn't stop it because it was his normal nature, natural nature. And if you take the the closest disciple, Mugalan Maharata, Mugalan and Sariputta. Mugalan, he was not he was not a very calm and quiet character. He was by nature a little aggressive. You know, when it came to debate, he was very aggressive. When it came to certain dealings, he was aggressive. So he had this aggressiveness throughout his life. And Sariputta was an academic. So he has this academicness throughout his life. So when these personal traits come into play, people who are looking from outside, especially if you haven't understood the doctrine, understood the real enlightenment, they start thinking, okay, so they are two different people. And when the original teacher passes away, you start branching out, and then you take you on a different path. So you have Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana. Mahayana has so many divisions, Theravada has many divisions, and within the same Theravada sect in Sri Lanka, we have so many sects. Amarapura.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. Yeah, Malapura, Ramanika. So one can wonder, especially I'm wondering now, which one tells the truth?
Well, if you, I found something very nice, yesterday someone sent it to my message, that if you start believing in someone else's experience, that's called religion.
Yeah, that's a good explanation.
And if you start experiencing your own reality, that's spirituality. Right? So the answer is that Buddhism is not about trying to believe someone. But having said that, you need to have a starting point. So, you know, we have no other way also. We need to anchor somewhere, start believing in something and pursue. But while you are pursuing, you need to have three critical qualities. The first thing is you need to have an open mind. That although you believe that, you don't close or shut down your opinions and your view to certain other opposing views. The second thing is you need to have a critical mind. You don't have to accept everything in its original form. You can critically accept it. And the third thing is you need to have a mind of awareness, which means that it has to be relatable to your own existence. The mind of awareness. So when you have these three qualities, you don't become a fanatic, cultish, religious person, but you become a more spiritual person who's open to ideas, who's critical to ideas, and who doesn't just take ideas and keep it stored as knowledge, but you apply it to yourself. You have self-actualization through that knowledge that you gain.
Now, a personal question, Thero. Now, I was thinking that this spirituality stems from the religion. I mean, it might not be one religion, but the concept of religion, did that affect spirituality?
Actually, both spirituality and religion has been there forever. Has been there forever. But the way I like to see it is that it's like a railway track. They go parallel, but they never meet. But they go very much parallel because religion takes a lot from spirituality. And
one feeds on the other.
And spirituality also does take things from religion. They are two parallel tracks. They are very close. You know, compared to politics or economics, they are very parallel, but they never coincide. Simply because of the purpose. A religious person or a person who needs a religion is about wanting to find answers to satisfy his day-to-day desires and needs, day-to-day fears and day-to-day desires. But a spiritual person stems a little away from that, and he stems from that, but he wants to find something which is beyond his existence, beyond his afterlife and before. So it's not about if you have a simple suffering because you lost something, it's not trying to address that. So spirituality goes on a different plane, but they are parallel because the same doctrine is shared. But religion tries to help people in a more therapeutic manner by giving answers, to give definitive answers. Because if you give a definitive answer, you can be satisfied. Buddhism is very dangerous. I don't think it qualifies as a religion at all. Because if you give an agnostic answer, people are not going to be satisfied. What I mean by agnostic is that someone comes and says, Sadhu, is there afterlife? Then I say, please question your belief. Why did you come up with that answer? Now that is not going to give me an answer. It will give me an answer in a more spiritual manner, but it's not going to give me an answer for my afterlife or my immediate burning question. So for a person like that, it will be very confusing. I came for an answer and what are you saying? So he's not going to accept that. But if I gave an answer, yes, you have a definitive afterlife. Whatever you do will exactly be replicated to you, and this is why you should be doing good things or bad things. Or if I say that, God Almighty has decided your future, and you need to fall by His rule, act as the Ten Commandments, and that's what you need to do. If I give that answer, he'll be much happier. And again, it depends not on the answer, it depends on your need. So people have different needs. There's this classical Maslow's pyramid of hierarchy. Why people do what they do. Sometimes you have very physiological needs. Sometimes you have needs above and beyond that. It's about power and love and ownership, etc. Self-esteem. And then you have this other self-actualization need. It's not about those things. It's about self-actualization, and that's where the spirituality starts.
Okay. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. Now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you are enjoying the conversation. So it's going to get even more interesting now as we move on to my next question. Now, another burning question that we face right now in the society there is, now we wake up listening to Bani and we go to sleep listening to Bani. But there's so much of suffering, so much of corruption now. For example, we hear on news a 15-year-old girl being raped by so many people. Now, what is happening, and is Bani helping people at all?
Well, Bana is helping people in many different ways, but probably not for the same spiritual reasons that we are discussing. But Bana is definitely helping people. Now, I'll give you an example. A month ago, one person came here, he wanted to commit suicide, and the whole reason he came to the temple because he wanted to tell me before he commits suicide. And then I asked him to chant a pirit, and he was chanting it in front of the statue, and after chanting it, he was fine. Later on when I asked, are you still suicidal? He said, Sadhu, you with so much help, just by chanting that pirit, I got over that. And see, that's the utility of Bana. So you can do that. And sometimes it's a good pastime. It's sad to say, it's a good pastime for many people, especially for retired people. When their children are done, when they are having their own lives, and when they have nothing to do, it's a good pastime. So it's helping them also in a way. But again, for a more, say, a more spiritually awakened person, I don't think it's helping a lot. The reason is that we think of certain things and then we act on certain things. Now I'll tell you, this is a meditation hall, and I have seen people who are meditating here, the compassionate meditation, Maitri Bhava. So what they do is they think that all sides of the world, all realms of the world, everyone, I'm going to be compassionate, I'm going to be forgiving them, etc. etc. And I see a lot of people who meditated in here for 1 hour, and when they get out, their slippers are missing. And they get agitated and they start screaming and shouting. They're agitated, and the Maitri is gone. So I think you can think of Maitri, or you can think of compassionate, be compassionate, or you can actually be compassionate. So those two things are two different things. Doing and contemplating are totally two different things. And there's another thing. Now, Buddhism, in doctrine, if you look at all the Tripitaka Pali Canon, right? Pali Canon talks about enlightenment in a more, in a more academic manner. It's like we are trying to learn swimming through Zoom. That's what people do right now. You start learning swimming through Zoom, and during Zoom, it will cover all the aspects of swimming. It will cover the physics of it, it will cover all the strokes, how Michael Phelps did it, it will cover all. But actual swimming is a totally different ballgame. And in order to do that, you really need to get into the water. So likewise, listening and understanding is good, but it doesn't stop at understanding. Now a lot of people think Buddhism is about trying to understand. It is not an understanding.
You need to put it into practice.
You need to put it into practice. The simplest thing you know, put it into practice. Now I'll say, there's a common word, attachment gives you grief. People know that, and every, if you're not mentally retarded, you understand it. But just apply in your common word. Oh, there's another very common saying, Jati Dukkha. Birth itself is a cause of suffering. Now again, it's this philosophical suffering, right? You won't feel it. That's because you don't feel it. No one says birth is a suffering. You celebrate your birthdays, right? So you don't consider it as a suffering at all. Why? Because it doesn't feel that way. It's only a philosophical suffering. So Bana is a philosophical path. What is more important is trying to apply even the simplest thing you figure out from that. Understanding is okay, but it's not very important. If you are to ride a bike as a child, you don't need to understand it. You just need to ride it. You need to find the balance and you need to ride it. But if you try to understand, you can go into the physics of it, the mechanics of it. You can go into extreme detail, but you still can't ride a bike. So what is more important is how you put it into practice to yourself and to others around.
So what I gathered from your thoughts is like, we are not practicing enough.
We are not practicing.
We are listening to so much of.
I'll tell you the reason for that, which is very important. Now, a lot of people say, beat any religion, right? Even yesterday, someone came who's not Buddhist. He said, going to the heaven or being with Lord Almighty is my only objective. And any Buddhist, pious Buddhist who comes in, he would say, attaining Nibbana or attaining enlightenment is my ultimate goal. People say that, and I accept that. But although I listen to them, I don't believe what they're saying. Why? If I ask, so if it's your only goal, would you like to come here and stay for the rest of your life with me? They won't agree with that, right? So they would say that I can't do it because I don't have time. If I ask, how much time do you commit on a week for your enlightenment or for your afterlife heaven? I have about 15 minutes or an hour for the entire week. They don't have time, which is fair enough. But then I also don't accept that answer. I don't think that they don't have time. I think they don't have priority. Because time is about how much you prioritize it. If you prioritize it, you have the time, right? So when I point it out to them and say, well, it is not the time that you don't have, it's the priority, they understand it. But I also don't agree with that answer. It's not the priority. It's that you are not sure of your own enlightenment. You don't believe in it. Although you say it, you don't believe in it. Because if you really believe in it, you won't be doing other things. You will have the priority, hence you will have the time. And going back to see what is lacking, what you really lack is the conviction. You are not convinced enough of your own enlightenment as per your religion, or for that matter, your own heaven. You are not convinced enough. The conviction is missing, and in Buddhism it's called as a Shraddha. It stems from that. That's how, if you look at a Hindi movie or a Korean movie, the hero or the heroine would fight with 100 people because he truly believes in his love. Right? So that conviction makes him do wonderful things that a normal person wouldn't. So what is different between a person who's convinced and not convinced is this. So if you start being convinced of your own enlightenment, you would have priority, hence you would have time, hence you would find the enlightenment. But the tricky part is, in order to be convinced, you cannot be just convinced. Right? I mean, I can say things, but you won't start believing it right away. It has to be convincible. You need to be convinced. And in order to be convinced of your own enlightenment or your heaven, you need time again. So you see, you get into a trap. In order to be convinced, you need time. Time is behind priority. Priority is behind conviction. So you are in a loop, and in order to break this very massive loop, you need a lot of energy. So it's again, I would say,
it's basically a test.
It's a test.
Yeah.
It's a test. And more often you find a lot of people do not want to break this loop. They are happy suffering and being happy for a short period of time. So that this temporary happiness and sadness, they complain, but they don't want to move on.
They don't want to get it from.
A lot of examples. I see a lot of couples. They themselves know that they are not fit, but they don't want to move on and start their own separate lives. They just complain. Some days they are happy, some days they are unhappy, and they're just complaining. Why I know that they're complaining is that they complain to me. So I listen to their grievances, and they just want to complain and live in that pit. So any person, regardless of his faith, if someone asks, would you like to, I'll tell you an example. A few weeks ago, I went to this rituals of Pansapula, and there was a elderly lady. She has moved from States after a short holiday. Like, she was stuck during the COVID lockdown, and she was telling Sadhu, I had the worst time of my life. America is such a bad country. So we know that America has a good GDP, it has all the law and order, good governance, everything is there. But she complains that it's a bad country. And when I asked why, she said, there's no ladies, there's no paripu, there's no living even, there's no soap opera, soap drama. So she complains of those things. And then I asked, what if somehow you do all these meritorious activities and you were called to be placed in Tautisa heaven?
She would still want to be with
She would still want to be with these kids, be with the notes around it. She would go. And if you ask the same question from a person, assuming that there's a burning hell, if you ask the same question, he would say, well, I like the demons here, I don't want to move myself. So often you see that people are very, they have a huge resistance to change and to let go. And for that matter, they are fine with all this suffering. So I find they're just fine with it.
They're just fine.